the session today. And I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce you Mr. Obe de Vries from the Ministry, the Dutch Ministry of Culture, Education and Science. So, Obe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rector, and colleagues. Very pleasant to be here again. It's about my 7th or 8th time I visited Bucharest now, and every time it's enjoyable, and I slept well. So you can have a nice morning, even though it is a Saturday morning, when you all have to come here and leave you that early. We try. I've laid out a small handout on your table, and this gives the... Sorry, I have to use this one. This gives the line-out of the presentation in 7 steps. First, a short introduction, then a story. I thought maybe we have to wake up with a story, a small, short story. Then a definition of learning outcomes, and then the main topic, assessment of learning outcomes. Then also seen from the viewpoint of students and learning outcomes, and a look from outside, and the conclusion how to go about it. The sheets are more or less the same as what is on your table, so you can follow more or less where we are. By way of introduction, I thought maybe going to the USA first, then return to Bologna and back to Bucharest, and then at last to this very university. And to start in the United States, there is an accreditation agency there called CHIA, the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, say that the arches of the United States. And they have already for a long time a prize for the best institution dealing with learning outcomes. Learning outcomes is a typical American concept, output, output, output. And they are, I think, a bit further than the continent. They have criteria for this prize. For instance, I have to check out all that articulation and evidence of the outcomes, success with regard to outcomes, information to the public about outcomes, using outcomes for improvement, and they have winners. Some institutions are invited to submit their applications, and one of them is Capella University of Minneapolis. And I would recommend to go to that website to see how they deal with learning outcomes. I have a small exercise on the way, if you have time to do that, and look at their learning outcomes. We'll see when we are there. Assessment. So the United States are quite far already, but also Europe has already taken some steps in the Bologna process. It was not there in the first instance of the Bologna Declaration in 1999, but in the 2003 already you find the word learning outcomes combined with competences in profile. In the 2005 it is linked to the generic descriptors, the Dublin descriptors, for each cycle, you know, all these in the bachelor, master and doctorate cycle, and then there are all those concepts like knowledge and understanding, and application, and judgment, and communication, and learning skills. They are also supposed to be linked to learning outcomes. And it said in 2007 in London, well, then really we have to start working on those learning outcomes, otherwise it is an empty phrase. And already yesterday Carl Holm has giving you examples of the Nordic countries in which they are also busy dealing with learning outcomes among each others. Again, that's not only the Bologna process that's interested in, it's also students. There was a student conference in Bucharest, last May on learning outcomes, and one thing they said, why are learning outcomes so important? Learning outcomes are the building block of a learner-centered educational model, in which flexibility, participativity, and the availability of choice rule supreme. So for students it's quite an interesting thing, this learning outcomes, because they think, well, it gives more flexibility perhaps to the educational system. We can participate in it, maybe by choosing learning outcomes, and we should really pay attention to that. I'll come back to that conference a bit later too. So I was wondering, now at Bucharest University, in this very hall, what are the issues dealing with learning outcomes here? I mean, it's an open question. Well, I really like to have an answer on this or that question. Are there any from Bucharest or from Iași, of course, or any other university? Say, well, which are the questions you are dealing with? Any things that come up in your mind?
So the problem of evaluation, for instance, evaluation of students,
Yeah.
evaluation of the work done, setting up curriculum.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. So it's really very close to assessment and evaluation. That's how we should go about it. Yeah. More issues.
The difference between learning outcomes and competencies, if any.
Yes, if any. Yeah. Okay. More issues. I think we will come by. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please ask and raise your finger and interrupt. It's not supposed to be a monologue, but also a bit of a dialogue, of course, among colleagues. And then the second question is, how are you going to tackle it? I think maybe a conference like this is a very good starter for tackling those issues. I mean, there has to become a sort of consensus of, this is how we are going to deal with these issues of evaluation or assessment, and to be more specific on learning outcomes and competences. That's not another thing you can invent from yourself at the top or in alone. You have to line up your forces and discuss them. So I think this is a good starter, and I wish there would be a follow-up, but that's for later. Okay, so for the first item I said, the learning outcomes are a sensitive issue at all levels, started in the United States, coming back to Bologna. Students are very interested, and even here at Bucharest University, there is interested in learning outcomes. Now I thought, I still have to explain why they are important, and for that matter, I thought of telling you a short story on a Saturday morning in a dark November. And I think I better stand for that, otherwise it will come across too much. It is taken from the book Preparing Instructional Objectives by Robert Mager, which was written already in the early 60s, and I studied, I already had this book. This is a later edition. I think the preface hasn't changed, and I'll tell you the story. Once upon a time, a seahorse gathered up his 7 pieces of gold and cantered out to find his fortune. Before he had traveled very far, he met an eel, who said, "Psst, hey bud, where are you going?" "I'm going out to find my fortune," replied the seahorse, proudly. "You're in luck," said the eel. "For 4 pieces of gold, you can have a speedy flipper, and then you'll be able to get there a lot faster." "Gee, that's swell," said the seahorse, and paid the money and put on the flipper and sweated off at twice the speed. Soon he came upon a sponge, who said, "Psst, hey, but where are you going?" "I'm going out to find my fortune," replied the seahorse. "You're in luck," said the sponge. "For a small fee, I'll have you this jet-propelled scooter, so that you will be able to travel a lot faster." So the seahorse bought the scooter with his remaining money and went zooming through the sea 5 times as fast. Soon he came upon a shark, who said, "Psst, hey, bud, where are you going?" "I'm going to find my fortune," replied the seahorse. "You're in luck. If you take this shortcut," said the shark, pointing to his open mouth, "you'll save yourself a lot of time." "Gee, thanks," said the seahorse, and zoomed off into the interior of the shark, and was never heard of again. This is what happens if you are not sure about the outcomes. If you are not sure what you are going to do, you can do anywhere, perhaps in the stomach of a shark. So it's an important thing. Yeah? That's appropriate. Now, what are they? Learning outcomes. People have been defining outcomes already for some time, and in the end, a general statement, maybe Carl, you've already pointed it yesterday, a general statement of what learning outcomes are is learning outcomes are statements of what a learner is expected to know, understand, and or be able to demonstrate after completion of a process of learning. This is very similar to the Bologna description of learning outcomes, only the word demonstrate has found its place here instead of to do. And I like this word demonstrate because it is a bit more open. You have to show that you have learned something. This seems quite a well, handy definition, but there are so many handy concepts in line with it. You have aims, you have objectives, you have attainment targets, you have competences. What are the relations between these? Actually, I would say that it's still very diffuse, and we should ask educationalists to be maybe a bit more precise on the definitions of all those different things. But generally speaking, I think aims are connected to, say, either a module or a program, but are formulated from the intention of a teacher. The teacher, my aim is that you will achieve this and this and that. Objectives are a bit a smaller bit of it, more specific. The module will say, well, the general aim is that you become good, well, whatever you become, but there are details in it for knowledge or for skills, and they are probably not at a smaller level. Then you have attainment targets. Attainment targets really suggest they are at the end. Also formulated from a bit the concept of society, administrative, inspectorate maybe, or teachers. And learning outcomes are more or less at the same level, but then as seen from the student. Formulated also in terms of what the student should do. And these then again are probably part of larger competences, wide, broad competences, which are more or less in the line of you are supposed to be a good doctor. You are supposed to be skillful in minor surgery. You are supposed to be very careful with communication of patients, which are broad statements, a layer higher, I would say, than learning outcomes, which would indicate certain specific elements of those broad competences. But this is just an interpretation, and I think we need more of these clear definitions. When you keep it, it is seen as from the student, or the student should demonstrate. It is wider than only knowledge and understanding, it's also skills. It can even be showing off a certain attitude. If you keep that in mind, I think, well, then you have to fiddle a little bit with the concept. I would say it is halfway the concrete possibility of competences at the one hand and objectives or modules at the other hand. Are there hierarchies in outcomes? Again, you can refer to Bloom from the 50s and the 60s, and probably if it raises some recognition, you will remember that he said, well, in terms of the cognitive domain, you have at least 6 layers of learning outcomes. First is the knowledge, reciting things. What are the capitals of Europe, European countries? Understanding, comprehension, the second layer. Why are they the capitals? Why are capitals now and again here and then they disappear again? That's what happens with capitals. Then the second one is, the third one is application. If you have to fly from Helsinki to Bucharest via capitals, Carl, what is the shortest route? Straight, of course, but then you have maybe other capitals on the way, Warsaw and where are they located? More or less the application of what capitals are. And then the fourth and fifth and sixth layers are analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. You recognize this again, and I think it's quite strong that this definition was already there in the 50s, and it's still maintained. You see it back in all kinds of papers right now. Not only in papers of the Bologna process, but also the Dublin descriptors of the programs. You can recall the Dublin descriptors, they are meant to give a certain description of the bachelor, the master, and the doctorate level. Again, you have the knowledge and understanding at the first layer, second, the application, and then the judgment, which stands for analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, and it is combined with communication and learning skills. So, learning outcomes and the definition and the hierarchy of it are clearly defined, and for good reason. Why? Because it makes it possible, for one thing, to understand what is meant. If you have a program in which students are supposed to reach learning outcomes, you say, this is what is meant. Second, it is also clear for students, this is the way in which I could be assessed. So it is an important thing for learning outcomes to have a kind of hierarchy, something, just knowledge, some more understanding, more analysis. In this hierarchy, you can see what is meant when students reach a certain end of a course. This brings us to the position of assessment. And assessment is not